So you don't want me to tell them that you were the most difficult author?
You can tell them
Is that what you're
Can I tell them that?
Is that what you're asking?
Can I tell that story?
Got it.
All right.
Hello. Episode 40 of People's Guide to Publishing
39.
podcast. That one? Oh, you're right. Sorry. I'm always jumping the gun.
This is why I'm taking over.
The hordes, they're unruly. Episode 39 of A People's Guide to Publishing. I am your host, Joe Beal, the autistic publisher, and the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, now in its second printing.
And I'm Ellie Blue, marketing and editorial director here at Microcosm, and I'm also an author. This was my first book, Everyday Bicycling.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we are going to talk about...
difficult authors.
Yes. Can I may as well just throw myself on the fire
on
right
the pike?
now.
Mm.
Throw myself on the pike. So we were talking before the episode, this may or may not make it into the bumper, about talking about like difficult behavior rather than difficult people. But then we decided that we would just talk about a difficult person, a difficult author, namely me. I was a very difficult author. So when I first had Everyday Bicycling come out, first of all, writing this book was a trial to me. I think it took me 2 years. Even though it's a very short book, I would probably do it in like 3 weeks if I were doing it now. The whole way I was plagued with anxiety. And then when it actually came out, I don't actually totally remember this. I think my memory just like has a little bit of a blank, but I do remember like going to a meeting at Microcosm with the publicity director and kind of having a tantrum. And maybe running out the door.
I believe your exact words at one point were, "Are we done here? Can I leave?"
I was so stressed out. And this experience of being a difficult author has given me a lot of empathy for the difficulties that other authors face, which, you know, we experience variously as, you know, wow, this person is really hard to work with, to like, oh, this person is having a hard time.
Yeah.
So we want to kind of give you, and I have a good friend who's an author who asks me a lot. Like, you know, I'll tell her stories about different people that I'm working with, and she'll be like, how do I know if I'm difficult or not? And she'll be like, you know, I had to ask my publisher to change something about my book that they didn't want to change. We had an argument about it. Am I being difficult, or am I just sticking up for what's right? And yeah, what would you...
That's an ethereal question. But from the publisher's point of view, there is a range of what is reasonable, and there are boundaries on what becomes the realm of difficult. If somebody is continually like being underhanded in their dealings with you, or being just sort of fundamentally dishonest, and or simultaneously accusing you of being dishonest, then that is a poorly behaved author.
Yeah, I would say that's like kind of the epitome of difficulty. Also, if the author is like literally sabotaging the process.
Yeah, which is surprisingly common, that an author will, when you explain that you need to use certain marketing words to explain to the audience that their book is for this audience, and the author fights back about that because they don't want that, that is like a typical kind of self-sabotage. Or when you explain tried and tested best practices for promoting the book or going on tour or any sort of other things, and they do the opposite because they think you are wrong or just don't want to do what is the known best practices, that is being a difficult author.
I would say, like, if you are an author and you're wondering if you're setting reasonable boundaries, asking reasonable questions, or being difficult, like, I would say the two factors at play usually are anxiety and ego.
Yeah.
And, like, I would say most people have both when they're writing a book. Like, both of those are very inherent in the process. Like, you need to have an ego to, like, get your work out there.
And to, like, have made a book in the first place. And
to, like, be able to stick up for it. Because, like, sometimes publishers, including us, will be, like, go down the wrong path and be, like, choose the wrong cover. And
so when we were developing Railroad Semantics, the box set, the original, which is, I feel like, a very nice package. And when we were originally putting it together, we didn't use the word train hopping because we thought it was pretty implied. But then when you look at this, and the cover has like a scenic photograph from the top of a train, and you just look at that, and it's just about railroads, and when it doesn't contain words like graffiti and train hopping, you're like, oh, that's a helicopter shot, or, nowadays that's a drone shot atop of a train. You wouldn't think that there's a person standing on top of the train taking that photograph. And that's the kind of thing where the sales reps had to come back and say, like, you probably should tell them that this is not like a hobbyist railroad book. This is like a hobo book. Like, if we miss this, when you're an author on a subject, you're like living in sort of a myopic world that it's hard to think about the things that you need to tell the general public about your book to let them know if it's appropriate for them or not.
Yeah, you're too close to it. And I think recognizing, to have a successful publisher relationship, you kind of need to recognize that multiple things are true at once. Like, what I've learned is needing to recognize both that, like, my vision for my book is, like, very well developed, and also that my publisher has, as a publisher now, I'm like, and the publisher also has, like, expertise and information and needs that may actually be completely counter to my own needs and vision. Like, when we're trying to sell a book into certain kinds of stores, sometimes we need to position it in even like a different category than the one the author thinks they're writing in.
Yeah.
And that's like, that can be a source of real friction and conflict. And I don't think that somebody pushing back against that is, like, sometimes that's a difficult conversation, but it doesn't mean like you're being a difficult person.
Yeah, it just means like you need to listen as well as state your piece,
Yeah, like, I think that having a trusting relationship from the start, and that's really on everybody, like, that's on the publisher and the author. And then I think the same thing goes with the anxiety piece of it. Like, most authors, I would say, have, especially first-time authors, have quite a bit of anxiety around their books. And that, like, as Dr. Faith would say, like, we all have a pair of crazy pants in our closet, and we bring them out at certain times.
I have a lot of pairs of crazy... Oh, this is a metaphor.
This is a metaphor.
I only have literal crazy pants. But I have a lot of them. I have enough for you, so
Brings
you can
them
get
out
rid of
every day.
yours. So
Yeah,
if you approach negotiations with your publisher on any subject that you are going to talk to them and get what you want, rather than having a conversation and hearing them out, you are being a difficult author. Like, you need to listen as much as you talk, because that is how this is a creative partnership, which it really fundamentally needs to be.
And if your publisher doesn't listen to you and doesn't hear you out and doesn't have, like, real responses to your concerns, they're being a difficult publisher.
Yeah, and it can be both ways.
And
And you can both be being difficult at the same time. It does not absolve you.
I've experienced this within my own person sometimes.
Right.
This is an argument against self-publishing, honestly, because you kind of do, things really do go better when you work together.
Right. And yeah, I had, we had a moment this week where a customer actually pointed out that we had, like, a faulty policy, and I got to have the, like, moment of satisfaction to, like, reflect and think about it and be like, yeah, we were wrong. That policy is no longer serving its purpose. Like, we should change that policy, and we did. And we communicated that to them, and I feel like that is sort of the kind of vulnerability, but also, like, introspection that you need as an author, is to be like, am I being strong-headed for a reason, or am I just being strong-headed?
And I think, like, it really helps me to keep in mind the goal, which is not to have the book of my dreams come out, and not to, like, please the part of me that is, like, desperately needing validation from it, or the part of me that wants to sell 1 million copies and become rich, but, like, the goal is to, like, create a book that will help the reader.
Yeah, and change the culture.
Yeah, and, like, if those two things are kept as the goal, then you can almost always work together to find a way to pool your expertise to get there. I think another thing that I learned from a really great book called Beyond Deal Making, it's a book about negotiation by Melanie Billings-Yoon, is that, like, the goal of any negotiation isn't to win or to, like, get a certain dollar amount. It's to, like, build a relationship that will be greater than the sum of its parts.
And is functional for everybody.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you're just, like, trumping over everybody, then, like, it's not a relationship. They're not going to keep working with you.
And it usually takes a little longer and requires more conversations, but if you have the patience for it...
This is why people don't like the president.
One of many reasons.
Yes, I'm sorry, a reason.
Can we give authors some tips on dealing with author anxiety? Because that's such a real thing, and it's so prevalent.
And I think the most important thing is to realize that your book will not just exist in your myopic bubble that you currently exist in. Your book will exist in the world where people will read it that have no familiarity with what the arguments are in your tiny circle or your friend group or your professional sphere. Like, they are using your book to learn about your subject and understand it and trying to figure out what the hell it is and who it's for, you know? So, like, that is, if you have a good publisher, that is what they're approaching it from.
Your book isn't about you. Like, literally, even if it's a memoir, it's not about you. It's always about the reader.
Let's hope.
I mean, and that's what people will take it as, you know? So, like, even if people read your book and they're like, oh, it has a typo in it. Oh, I don't like the cover. Oh, I think it's totally wrong. I totally disagree with you. Like, that's all about them. Mm-hmm. And that does not affect your skill, validity, or worth in any way. You know, like, when we work with you on a book, we are working to make the best book we can for the reader. It won't be for every reader.
Yeah.
But it's also like, you know, it's a thing that you're putting out there in the world, but it's not you. The book is not the same as you. So don't worry. You're not, like, self-promoting. You're not, like, putting yourself out there for judgment.
So when I founded Microcosm, I had never thought about writing. That was so far and away from any of my interests. But that came up years later. And so it really hurt my feelings when we would get negative reviews of our books, because it felt like such an expression of myself, and I felt like these people didn't really get it, and they didn't really understand where I was coming from, or like the kind of resources we didn't have at that time. But I'm going to tell you, when I did the People's Guide to Publishing, there were some negative reviews, and they are, I will say, maybe I'm just like have matured in 24 years, or who knows, but I can take it, I can laugh, and I don't know. I see the advice a lot where the author should not even look at their own reviews, because there will be negative reviews, and even in the positive reviews there will be critical ones. And I've seen that should be like filtered by their agency and their publisher, which I don't really agree with. I feel like you need to sort of take what you can agree with and you can see as a valid criticism and like where there's a kernel of truth. And that is why I was so happy with the People's Guide to Publishing reviews. My favorite says that they don't like, that is a 1-star review, because while the information in the book is very helpful and accurate, they did not like the veiled forms of promoting socialism. And I want to say that they very clearly mean that they are upset that I am not racist. And this is that the book as expression is not racist. They, are not talking about me. They're complaining about the book. And see what we just talked about? Not about me.
You identified with the book?
Talking about the book.
Maybe you are a racist, Joe.
We'll have to ask that reviewer. And then my other favorite one, they really latched on to that. I wrote, there's one sentence in the book that it says that if you have a typo, people will identify you as the underdog, and that can be helpful in garnering support. And they wrote like 4 paragraphs about this one sentence and how it made them thoroughly question my expertise and how that had not been their experience whatsoever. And, I really wanted to see their typo on the cover, because I feel like that would be the most illuminating thing to see why this like really hit a nerve for them. But, it's like one of those things where I'm like, they're maybe reading what I wrote out of context. They certainly are. They aren't reading the sentences before and after it in at least their responses. But these things are, it's like I stand behind those things because in so many ways that the book needs to stand as a whole, and I've seen the same thing happen to Ellie many times where like people will criticize one line or not even criticize the book at all. They'll criticize what they think the book is. And I can tell you that is like the mark of success, when people feel like they need to take a stance on this thing that you made and they haven't actually read it.
Can I like deliver the punchline?
You may.
So, A People's Guide to Publishing, actually the first printing had multiple typos on the cover.
Wait, what? Multiple?
Multiple typos on the cover. They got past us. This was
Cool.
not intentional, but it was perhaps subconscious.
I don't know.
See if you can find them all.
It's a good joke. I hope we left them all there and added a few more for the reprints.
I feel like we've strayed a little bit from a couple times from the topic of difficult authors.
Really lost
to...
our value. Maybe I've become the difficult author.
You definitely are more interested in talking about cover development, but that's like every day in your life.
Mm-hmm. But those are the sort of the things where I can't tell you how many authors have complained about their cover development and how we don't understand and how we should really just let their friend design the cover. And like they don't understand that this is a professional craft outside of fine art. And again, like that is being a difficult author.
So I would say, like, in summary, like, before, as a publisher or author, before you work with anyone, make sure that there's an element of trust and respect and that you continue to, like, feed that as you grow and to, like, hear each other out.
And that it goes both ways.
Yeah, and to, like, always, like, if you disagree with something...
That's okay.
It's okay, but, like, make sure you know why you disagree with it and are able to articulate it, and once you've said it, like...
And have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And like an actual conversation, not like I am going to change how this is behaving right now.
Yeah, and there's like a power dynamic too that we didn't really get into, but I think that really does, I mean, just the fact that we're sitting here as publishers talking about difficult authors, and authors aren't necessarily sitting around talking about difficult publishers.
Oh, but they are.
They are, but they also, I feel like, also kind of see us as having the final say, which we do, and so it is a little bit like more on us to... like help the author than it is on the author to not be difficult.
Right. And I've seen this a lot where people complain about sort of the off-the-cuffness of agencies and publishers to like talk about their worst case examples of, or like the most ridiculous things they're subjected to. And I understand that because it feels like it's sort of punching down on the people that are like misbehaved and, you know, not following directions. But I also see it as like, you know, we all need to kvetch in the world, and if something really funny happens, like, you have to tell somebody about that because that's hilarious, you know. And it's also like, you know, it's like you can see it as venting or you can see it as like complaining, but like at the end of the day, it's like, you know, it's people.
I feel like the people who are the most difficult are the least likely to think of themselves as difficult, and the people that are the least difficult are the most likely. Like, if you think you might be being a difficult author, chances are very good that you're not.
Yeah, it means you have some self-awareness.
Yeah, it means that, like, you're concerned about... Yeah, you're concerned about it. And I just want to reassure you, that's probably not you.
Thanks for joining us on The People's Guide to Publishing, episode 39. I am your host, Joe Beal, the autistic publisher, author of the multiple printings of A People's Guide to Publishing, the book.
And I'm Ellie Blue, marketing and editorial director at Microcosm and a difficult author. But they still worked with me on more books, and they hired me, so see, it's not the end of the world if you're a difficult author.
Sometimes difficult author has other skills.
Might be your path to success.
Till next week. Thanks so much for joining us once again on A People's Guide to Publishing, the podcast, episode 36. I am your host, Joe Beal, the autistic publisher.
I'm Ellie Blue, the editor who doesn't pay attention to commas.
And please send us your questions so we can answer them on future episodes. And please do give us those reviews on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed. 5 stars, if you please. And have a wonderful week.
Thank you. You can find us on the internet at microcosmpublishing.com or microcosm.pub if you want to keep it short and simple. You can also find us on Twitter at Microcosm, on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing, on Instagram at microcosm_pub, and here in Portland on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.